The phone shakes in her hand, her voice barely audible. "He sits here," she whispers. In the background, there's a crack, sharp, fast, final. Gunpowder stings the air. Her breath catches. It's not the sound of someone breaking in. It's the sound of someone who was never willing to leave. She did everything they say you're supposed to do. Ended it, moved on, changed the locks, and none of it mattered. If you think cutting someone off is where the danger ends, you've never dealt with a man who thinks your freedom is a threat. We've covered dozens of cases like this on true crime case tapes, but none where the victim was still alive on the phone until everything cut out. What the officers found inside that apartment, even they had to step back, and it's what happened after the final shot that stays with them. By the time Keandra Long turned 28, she had built a world that looked solid. She worked long shifts as a nurse in Garland, Texas, steady, respected, dependable. She wasn't just clocking in and out, she was the one holding patients' hands when no one else would. Friends called her Cakey, family called her their glue. She didn't have children, but if you looked at how she showed up for people, the late-night check-ins, the jokes that could snap anyone out of a bad mood, you'd swear she was born to be someone's safe place. She lived like she gave more than she got, and no one thought that would ever put her in danger. Her apartment wasn't big, but it was hers. A couch full of throw blankets, family photos by the door, a half-finished meal on the counter when police would later arrive. She had just started to enjoy coming home. She was trying actively to rebuild after walking away from someone who didn't respect her boundaries. That someone was Gregory Lowe. He was instead a mystery. He was instead even a secret. They had dated, it had ended, and she didn't hide that she'd moved on. The first sign that Gregory wasn't over it came in July 2020, 10 months before the shooting. Police were called to her place. He'd shown up uninvited. They had an argument. Nothing violent, no arrests. Just a tense exchange over her phone. Who she was texting, what she was hiding. The officers left. No report of threats. Case closed. Except it wasn't set. That argument wasn't about a phone. It was about control. He wanted access to her, her conversations, her choices. And when she stopped giving it to him, something inside him started slipping. But Keandra didn't make a scene. She didn't blast his name on social media. She just backed away, quietly, carefully. Her friends saw her smiling more. She picked up extra shifts, went to brunch. She was making playlists again, laughing during FaceTimes. She told a cousin she was finally feeling free. That's what made it so cruel. Because Gregory didn't want her back. He wanted her stuck. In the months that followed, there were subtle moments that should have drawn more attention. She'd mentioned she'd seen his car parked down the street. She once joked, "He's probably tracking my Spotify at this point." Everyone laughed. She did too. But she didn't change her locks. Didn't file a restraining order. Didn't want to start drama. One night she came home and thought the back door was unlocked. Another time she swore she heard a knock but no one was there. Little things, dismissed things. What no one knew was that Gregory hadn't accepted the breakup. He hadn't made peace with her choosing herself. And he wasn't planning to walk away quietly. Pause this video. Check your texts. Scroll up. Have you ever messaged someone one more time after they stopped replying? Now flip it. What if they would instead stop? Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to True Crime Case Tapes so you don't miss what we're about to show you. Still watching without subscribing? Drop a comment and tell us why. We want to know who's just lurking. The last weeks of Keandra Sip's life looked peaceful. That's the trap. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't scared, at least not openly. To everyone else, she was doing better. She picked up her mom Sep's favorite candles, helped a friend plan a birthday dinner, sent a Venmo to her little cousin with the note, "You better pass that exam." Nothing about her life looked like the prelude to violence. But that's the pattern. It's not always yelling, or bruises, or threats. Sometimes, it's silence. A presence you didn't invite. A name that keeps showing up in places it shouldn't. A history that once stay in the past. She didn't post warnings. She didn't tell her friends he was stalking her. She didn't call the police again, because even Keandra, someone smart, intuitive, and trained to handle emergencies, didn't realize how far it would go. She thought she had time. She thought he said let go. She was wrong. It was Sunday night. Keandra was home, her shift was over, scrubs off, candles lit. The kind of evening where the most stressful thing should have been deciding what to watch. Outside, the complex was quiet. No sirens. No shouting. Just the faint hum of air conditioning and the occasional thud of someone dragging a trash bag down the stairs. Inside her apartment, the air was still. She was likely walking between her kitchen and her living room when it started. Their stats, no security footage, no eyewitness, only the call. 9:20 p.m. The line opened. The voice came through. Low, rushed, unmistakably urgent. "He sits here," Keandra said. Then, "He has a gun. He sits inside. He sits shooting." The dispatcher tried to steady her, tried to get the address, a layout of the room. In the background, muffled shouting. A crash. A pause. Then shots, not one, but several. Then silence. The dispatcher was still speaking when it happened. She had to keep the line open. Protocol. She had to keep her voice calm, even when her hands were shaking. The last thing she heard was a gasp. And then nothing. Police units were already in motion. Garland officers logged the call at 9:20 p.m. The first squad car pulled into the lot by 9:24. Did instead hesitate? Did instead knock? The door was closed, but not locked. It pushed inward with a sound that would stay with them. The living room was dim, a single light on in the hallway. They cleared left, then right, and then they saw her. Keandra was on the floor. A cell phone near her hand, screen cracked. Multiple gunshot wounds. No pulse. Beside her was Gregory Lowe, still breathing. Barely. He had one wound. A single focused shot to the head, self-inflicted. The gun was next to him. Officers immediately called for EMS. They secured the weapon, checked for other threats. There were none. The shooter wasn't yet running. He was fading. The apartment was a capsule of the final minutes. Shell casings near the door, a purse on the counter. One of Keandra's sandals kicked halfway across the floor, like she turned too fast. But let's sits back up, because how Gregory got in is still unclear. Police never publicly confirmed whether he forced entry, was let in, or used a copy of the key. Some speculated he knocked and argued his way inside. Others believe he may have still had access, a spare key, or a moment where the door was unlocked. What's Seb's clear is that this wasn't Seb a random act. Gregory showed up with a plan. He brought a gun. He waited until she was home. This wasn't a confrontation that spiraled out of control. It was a final decision executed in a confined space. Inside that apartment, the noise was immediate and final. But outside, it was eerily quiet. Neighbors didn't know what was happening until they saw police running in. No screaming, no warning. One woman across the courtyard told reporters she only realized something was wrong when she saw an officer slam a trunk shut and pull out yellow tape. To those outside, it looked sudden. To those inside, it was planned. Later, investigators would confirm Keandra was shot multiple times. The gun belonged to Gregory. His injury was self-inflicted. No one else was in the apartment, and the 911 call captured the entire attack in real time. So what happened in those final moments? Based on the audio, it's believed there was shouting, possibly Gregory demanding to talk, accusing her of something. The dispatcher noted rising tension, voices overlapping. Then the shots. He didn't give her time. Didn't let her speak. Didn't care that she was on the phone with 911? This wasn't see a man lashing out in panic. It was someone who couldn't accept that she had closed the door and that it would stay closed. He turned the gun on himself right after. Not days later, not after fleeing, right then. He knew what he came there to do, and once it was done, he followed the script he'd written for both of them. Keandra died at the scene. Gregory died shortly after at the hospital. He never woke up. He was never questioned. He never faced her mother. Never answered for the months that led to this night, and there would be no trial, no courtroom, no sentencing. Just the sound of the dispatcher's voice trying to get her to speak again. And silence. There steps a pattern here. Not in the method, in the mindset. Men like Gregory don't set. They decide. They'd also want to move on. They want control. And when that control slips away, they treat the person who took it back as a threat. Keandra didn't set belong to him, but in his head she did. And if he couldn't be in her life, no one could. That logic is common in domestic violence cases. Experts call it coercive control. It starts as criticism, escalates to monitoring, then shifts to threats, spoken or not. But the public rarely sees the pattern until it ends with a report like this. Before this, Gregory had no violent record, just one documented argument over her phone. No charges, no restraining order. So how do you spot a threat when it hides in plain sight? You look at the pattern, not the blow-up, the build-up, because it's always there. If this story is turning your stomach, it should. This is happening in real life, in real homes, and places you'd never expect. So hit like, share this video, and subscribe to True Crime Case Tapes if you want the truth about what's hiding in the everyday. And if you're still watching without hitting that subscribe button, tell us why in the comments. We read every one. If you don't think this story matters, explain yourself. What did police find when they reviewed the evidence? No messages sent that night. No calls between them. No argument that escalated. Just him, showing up, armed, and ready to erase her choice. The scene was clean. No struggle marks. No overturned furniture. Just bullet holes in the drywall and blood soaking into the carpet. And a phone. Still on. Still connected. Recording the last time she ever used her voice. What do you do with that? How do you respond to a crime that ends with no questions, no pursuit, no court date? For Garland PD, it was procedural. They closed the case. Medical examiner ruled homicide and suicide. But for Keandra's family, for her friends, her mother, the case didn't close. There was no moment of justice, just loss. Just knowing she called for help and help came seconds too late. What happened in that apartment was such random. It was the end of a slow countdown only one person knew was ticking. Keandra didn't see herself as a victim. She didn't post cryptic messages. She didn't ask for protection. Because like too many others, she thought he'd eventually let go. That ignoring him would make him stop. That distance was safety. But control doesn't respect distance. And when he realized he'd lost it, he chose the one option that would make sure she couldn't ever move forward. Why did it happen? To understand that, we need to move past the moment of the crime and into the mindset that made it possible. Gregory Lowe didn't attack Keandra in a fit of rage. He didn't stumble into her apartment and lose control in the heat of the moment. He made a decision not just on the night it happened, but every time he crossed a boundary in the weeks before. There sets a profile that matches too closely in cases like this. Someone who believes walking away is betrayal. Someone who interprets rejection as humiliation. Someone who thinks that if they're not in control, they've already lost. Gregory didn't just want Keandra back. He wanted her attention, her silence, her fear, and when she gave him none of those things, his fixation sharpened. The argument over her phone months earlier wasn't about trust. It was about ownership. He didn't ask who she was texting. He demanded to know why he wasn't being prioritized. That's how it starts. Small infractions masked as jealousy. I just care too much. I'm only like this because I love you. Sound familiar? Control doesn't always show up as violence. It shows up as monitoring, guilt tripping, emotional pressure. And it escalates when you stop playing along. By the time Keandra had moved on with her life, Gregory had already begun unraveling his. Experts in domestic abuse say that the moment a partner leaves or even hints at leaving is often when danger peaks. Not during the arguments, not during the cold silences, after the goodbye. That sets the critical window, and it sets one of the most misunderstood. From the outside, everything looks safer. The calls stop, the texts slow down. People assume the worst is over. But for abusers who hinge their identity on control, losing access is a threat. And threats demand a response. What we see in this case is the psychology of entitlement. Gregory saw himself as owed something: attention, respect, a second chance. When he didn't get it, he decided to reclaim it by force. This was instead about love. It was about dominance. And dominance doesn't set accept no. That's what makes this so dangerous. Because men like Gregory don't need a reason to hurt someone. They just need an opportunity. Let's talk about the missed signs. Not by Keandra, by the system around her. The only known prior interaction with police was categorized as a non-violent dispute. No threats, no assault. So there was no follow-up, no court date, no order of protection. But what if we stopped waiting for violence to confirm risk? What if an ex showing up uninvited, demanding explanations about your private life, was enough to trigger support? Because make no mistake, that incident in 2020 wasn't set random. It was Gregory testing boundaries. And when there were no consequences, he learned he could keep testing. That's not speculation, that's pattern recognition. Control escalates when it sits unchallenged. And by the time someone like Gregory decides it's too late, they've already reframed the victim's independence as an act of aggression. Now imagine being in Keandra Sepp's shoes. You've moved on. You're not being stalked. No one's texting threats. Just someone showing up every now and then. A familiar name. A past you've already closed the door on. Do you call the cops every time? Do you tell your friends something vague feels off? Or do you keep going, hoping that your silence sends the message? That sets the trap. We don't teach people to treat control as danger until it becomes undeniable. And by then, the window is already closed. So what does danger actually look like in these cases? It looks like someone minimizing your voice, monitoring your location, showing up uninvited, not once, but twice, demanding to know who you peer with, refusing to leave when asked. It sits not always screaming. It sits often quiet, persistent, just enough to make you second guess whether you're overreacting. The problem is, people like Gregory rely on that doubt because doubt keeps doors unlocked, and unlocked doors are all they need. For the public, it's easy to categorize these stories as senseless, but they follow a script. One that starts with isolation, moves into monitoring, ends in force. Every expert in domestic violence will tell you, if someone says they won't leave me alone, take it seriously. If someone laughs nervously when an ex calls again, don't laugh with them. Ask questions. Because silence does set equal safety. The final point is this: Keandra didn't ask for help because she didn't know she needed it. There were no bruises, no threats on paper, but there were signs. We just don't set trained people to see them. That's why this case matters. Because if you want to protect someone in your life, you have to start noticing what doesn't look dangerous until it's too late. Let me show you what to look for. Uninvited visits, possessive language disguised as care, pressure to respond quickly, attempts to isolate from friends or family, anger when boundaries are enforced. If you've seen any of that, even once, say something. Ask the hard questions. Offer help, not just when it's visible, but when it's barely there. Because what happened to Keandra didn't start with a gun. It started with control. And control always has a cost. By the time the sun rose over Garland, the apartment was sealed. Yellow tape across the stairwell, patrol cars stationed at the parking lot entrance. And the family already knew. Keandra Sepp's mother arrived early. She wasn't set allowed past the tape. An officer met her at the edge and shook his head, gently, like even he couldn't believe what he had to say. Other family members showed up soon after, eyes scanning the scene, hoping it wasn't real. Some called her phone again. It rang. No answer. They didn't get to see her. They didn't get to hold her hand or say goodbye. They only got silence and the knowledge that she had tried in her last moments to get help. Inside the apartment, crime scene techs worked quietly. Photos were taken, casings collected, the weapon secured. The evidence was clear. No one else had been involved. Gregory Lowe was the shooter, and he had made sure no one else could speak for him. There would be no interrogation, no statements, no trial. He died at the hospital hours after the attack, transported under police custody but never formally charged. Justice in the legal sense was sealed with a death certificate, To the system, it was a closed case. To her family, it was a permanent wound. Keandra's friends gathered the next night for a vigil. Purple ribbons tied to fences, candles flickering in glass jars, photos clipped to poster board, smiling, laughing, her head tilted just slightly like she always did in selfies. Someone brought balloons in her favorite color. They didn't release them right away. They just stood in a circle, not speaking, passing the lighter from hand to hand. A few people didn't cry until they saw her mother. That steps when it broke. The dispatcher who took the 911 call requested leave. She heard everything. She stayed on the line until it disconnected. And then she had to keep working. Other calls, other voices. But that one stayed with her. For Garland PD, the timeline was tight. They were on scene within minutes. They documented everything. There were no major procedural failures, no missed warrants, no overlooked warnings in the immediate aftermath. But that didn't make the outcome easier to explain. How do you reconcile "we did everything right" with "she still died"? The case was listed in official records as a domestic murder-suicide. It was included in the Texas Council on Family Violence's annual report, one of over 200 such cases that year. That number wasn't a statistic to Keandra's mother. It was a confirmation that her daughter's name was now part of something bigger and more devastating. Online, strangers lit digital candles. Over 1,000 of them. Each one a small act of memory. Each one a message. We see her. If you've been watching and haven't liked, shared, or subscribed to True Crime Case Tapes, why not? This is what we cover. Real people, real pain, real warnings. Subscribe right now. Because next week's set story, let's just say it involves a teen girl, a fire escape, and a voicemail that made an entire precinct freeze in place. Still not subscribed? Comment below. We're watching, and we want to know why. There will never be a sentencing hearing. No verdict. No parole board. The justice system didn't punish Gregory Lowe. He did that himself. But for those left behind, that wasn't sit justice. It was a final, irreversible silencing. And they're the ones who still live with it every day. Her voice is still on the recording. Low, steady. Not screaming, just saying what mattered most. He sets here. It sets the kind of sentence you don't forget. Not because of how it ends, but because of what comes next. We think of danger as loud. But when it finally arrived for Keandra, it crept in quiet. No alarm. No warning. Just a name she once trusted. Stepping across a line she thought she'd already erased. And now? Her phone is silent. Her apartment is empty. But her story isn't etched over. Because someone you know right now is hoping silence will keep them safe. They set her wrong. So if this one stayed with you, let it change how you listen, how you show up, and how you spot the signs before they close the door. You can go now. But don't pretend this one follow you. Sweet dreams.